Welcome. Today we talk about multiple things. We're going to first talk about and give obeisances to the monks walking for peace and the chaos that people have created in some parts of America as the monks walk, and the egoic fracture that keeps showing itself. I saw one of the head monks talking, and in the background you could hear a Christian, probably Zionist, zealot, speaking against the evils of one religion as opposed to the other, their own religion, my God, my religion, my supremacy. And I find that was quite interesting because we can never forget the lady with the baby formula. We're 30 churches were called, and many of you know what happened. I'm not going to go into it. You can look up baby formula lady test, and you'll see that one Buddhist temple said, yes, we'll give you baby formula. One Appalachian broken down church with an old preacher said yes, and two Muslim temples said yes. The rest said no. Christian churches, Baptist, Lutheran, I don't give a shit, Catholic, they said no. No, we're not going to give you a baby formula, not even a can. We don't care your baby's crying. So here are these monks who are walking across this beautiful, and it is, magnificent country. And the slurs. There's a lot of joy, but I'm going to talk about the slurs because it's weird how it's good to talk about the positive. And we'll be talking about the positive in a minute. Because after this little chat, I'm going to be reading from The Lost Years of Jesus. And we're going to be talking about Jesus, a.k.a. Yeshua, a.k.a. Isa. Now, one of the interesting things that I see is the inability to mirror voice and body posture, language, body language. This is called neuro-linguistic programming. Neuro, NLP. Why am I talking about this? Because when a person is speaking to you in a low, sweet voice, you don't speak fast and loud. One of the things that's important to teach your children and to master in yourself is to mirror people's energy out of just respect. You don't barrel into people's spaces. You respectfully move in the culture that you're faced with, right? And the nuances of these cultures can be easily accessed in less than 2 minutes on your phone, literally 2 minutes. But most importantly, you shouldn't have to. All you need to do is really actually just mirror the body language, especially when people are walking and moving in mindful meditation. These monks walking for peace are walking for peace. They are in a meditative state quite often. There are multiple ways to meditate, and one of them is walking meditation, which Thich Nhat Hanh talked about quite often. Dr. Joe Dispenza has guided walking meditations, by the way. So to yell and scream, to wave and to try to get the attention is selfish. And it breaks the mindful meditation that they're on. I'm not even going to talk about some of the food that was presented. Sandwiches like from Subway, instead of bringing fruits and vegetables and warm vegetarian soups with barley, things of that nature, and kind of looking at, again, 2 minutes on the internet will give you the answers as to what foods would be preferable to any one people. And doing that shows respect and mindfulness and consciousness. Yeshua would have walked with these men. In fact, Yeshua did walk with men like this. And that's really why I'm doing this live today. I'm going to read to you from The Lost Years of Jesus, written by Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and the discoveries of Notowich, Abbe Ananda, Rarik, and Kaspari, and there was an admiral. 5 people saw the evidence that Yeshua studied in Tibet. And I think it's perfect to start reading. And I will pause and make comments, and let's begin. Translator's note. In translating the travels of Mr. Nicholas Notovich in Tibet, the life of Saint Isa, with the resume and explanatory notes, I desire to say that I in no way adopt or identify myself with the theological speculations, theories, or controversial points contained in this volume. I accept in good faith the assurance conveyed to me by Mr. Notowich that the records of Saint Isa were discovered by him at the convent of Himis. But I guard myself from expressing any opinion as to the authenticity or veracity of the document now presented to the English reader. Fear, fear, fear. I venture, however, to supplement the brief reference made by Mr. Notowich to the curious resemblance which exists between the Catholic and Tibetan religion. Now listen to this. Listen to this. In reference to the biography Universelle published at Paris in 1814, I find that Hippolyte Desideri, a Jesuit priest, visited Tibet in 1715 and Lhasa in 1716, and that he translated into Latin the Kangyar or Sohoran, a work which among the Tibetans has the same authority, so his biographers say, as the Holy Scriptures among the Christians. The biographer states that Desideri applied himself principally to study the similarities which seem to extend to him existent in the Christian and Tibetan religions. Christian, Jesus, Yeshua. We're not talking about the Old Testament here, we're talking about Yeshua. The earliest known visitor to Tibet, listen to this. The earliest known visitors to Tibet was Father Odoric of Pordinon, who is supposed to have reached Lhasa about the year 1328. Now the Cathars were slaughtered in the 13th century in France. And if you follow me, you'll understand, you'll start putting it all together where I'm going. Now, why in the hell, seriously, why in the hell is an Italian father, right, Father Odoric of Pordenone, why is he traveling in 1328 to Tibet? Why? Unless the stories from the Cathars, right? Mary Magdalene escapes, right? Israel, Palestine, pregnant, possibly with Jesus, possibly with Yeshua, with his mother, and some of their entourage, including his uncle, right? And they land in France. And there's a cave in France where she lived supposedly for 40 years, preaching what people call the word. I'm going to say the word. Preaching the word, not the gospel of today, but the word. The word of what? The word of many philosophies of the existence of the one who created us all. And then suddenly, they're writing their own books. The Cathars are basically standing in their innocence and purity. And why are they pure? Well, because they see women as equals. Women can preach the word. Well, I mean, why wouldn't they, right? Mary Magdalene is preaching the word in France. And she gives birth to at least one female that we know of, Sarah. One. And I like to hope that for at least 10 or 15 years, Yeshua was her companion, her beloved consort. That's my own little fantasy world. But aside from that fantasy, everything's documented. Now ask yourself, try to remember how hard it was to travel across the world. Why is a Father Orderic going to Lhasa around the year 1328 AD? Why? Unless right on the heels of the Cathars being slaughtered, he came and they came across their holy books, their books of the story, Gnostic books on the lost teachings of Christ, the real teachings of Christ. And again, why am I going down that rabbit hole being a spiritualist? Because I want to know why they fucked over us for this long, these many years, suppressing women, blaming women, and basically destroying the high priestess. Why? Because Mary Magdalene was a high priestess. So why? So Father Odoric of Pordenone must have, this is my hypothesis, must have read some information that the Cathars had recorded about, the lost years of Yeshua. And truth. By the way, when they slaughtered the Cathars, they slaughtered all the books. So here he is, and I'm sure that some of the monks, some of the priests kept some things secretly. He was followed 3 centuries later by the Jesuit Antonio Andrada. Do you understand? Why are these priests going to Tibet? No, just think for a second. Why are they going to Tibet? What the hell do they need to go to Tibet? I thought they had everything they needed about Yeshua. So why are they going to Tibet if Yeshua never went there, never studied there? So you've got the Jesuit Antonio Andrada, who goes there in 1661, and then followed by Father Gruber and Dorville. The first Englishman to have entered Tibet was George Bogle, who was an ambassador of Warring Hastings when in 1774 to the Lama of Shigatse. Mr. Bogle remained in Tibet for some length of time, but published no account of his expedition. Why not? Well, I'll tell you why not. Because, would anybody believe him anyway? From a letter, however, of Mr. Stewart to Sir John Pringles relative to his embassy, it seems clear that Mr. Goebel had himself been struck by the similarities which Desideri investigated, as will be seen from the following passages extracted from the Encyclopedia Britannica, Volume 20, 1810, which I fancy do not appear in the more recent encyclopedia. Listen to this. It is an old notion that the religion of Tibet is a corrupted Christianity. Did you hear that? Let me read it again. It is an old notion that the religion of Tibet is a corrupted Christianity, and even Father Desideri, the Jesuit who visited the country about the beginning of this century, the 18th century, thinks he can resolve all their mysteries into our own and insist with a truly mystical penetration that they, the Tibetans, have certainly a good notion of the Trinity. The truth is that the religion of Tibet, from whatever source it sprung, is pure and simple, in its source conveying very exalted notions of the deity with no contemptible system of morality, but in its progress greatly altered and corrupted by worldly men. This is in the Encyclopedia Britannica in 1810, Volume 20. Duhalde translated the letters of Hippolyte Desideri from Italian into French, and in one dated from Lhasa, April 10, 1716. The priest writes, as to their religion, they call God Gongkok, and seem to have a notion of the Trinity, for sometimes they name him Gongkok-shik, or the One God, at other times Gongkok-shom, or the Trin God. They use kinds of beads on which they repeat Om, Ha, Hum, Om. They say implies intelligence, or the arm, eyed east power, Ha, the word, and Hum, the heart, or love, and that these 3 words signify God. So let's put it together. Om, Ha, Hum. Gruber, the Jesuit, and Horace de la Peña, head of a Capuchin mission, pointed the resemblance existing between the religion of the country and their own. Their conjecture were founded upon the dress of the lamas, which is not unlike that of the apostles in ancient paintings. That their subordination, which has some likeness to the ecclesiastic hierarchy, the resemblance between certain of their ceremonies and those of the Roman ritual, their notion of an incarnation and their maximum of morality. Gerbinium mentions some of their ceremonies as use of holy water, singing services, prayer for the dead, and adds their dress is like that in which the apostles are painted. They wear the mitri like bishops, and further their great lama among them is nearly the same as the sovereign pontiff among the Romanistic. Gruber goes farther. He affirms that although no European or Christian was ever there before, yet their religion agrees with the Romish in all essential points. Thus they celebrate the sacrifice of the Mass with bread and wine, give extreme unction, bless married couples, say prayer over the sick, make procession, honor the relics of idols. He should have said saints, have monasteries and nunneries, sing in the service of the choir like the Romish monks, observe diverse fasts during the year, undergo most severe penitence, among which whipping, consecrate bishops and send out missionaries who live in extreme poverty and travel barefoot through the deserts as far as China. These things, adds Gruber, I was an eyewitness of. If Jesus was never in Tibet, why are they going to Tibet? See, that's the question you have to ask yourself. That's the only question. And the question is, do they really want us to know the last years of Tibet? Now, a while back, I read to you one of my other readings out loud of this book. I read to you that when Notowich decided to write his book on the lost years of Isa, in around 1850s or something like that. I might have the date wrong, but 1870s, whatever. He had a couple Catholic priests tell him, don't do it, don't write about it, don't talk about it. Why would? And I didn't know, right, that these men had gone to Tibet. Jesuit priests, Capuchin monks. I had no idea. Okay, so clearly when Notovich, by the way, it wasn't just Notovich. Let me go back to the list because I always tell you the list. I'm going to tell it to you again. I'm just going to read it to you again. How it was recorded. Okay, so Nicholas Notovich discovered the long-lost documents in 1887 at the Himis Monastery in Ladakh. Swami Abhinanda published a Bengali translation of the Himis manuscript in 1929. Nicholas Roerich quoted the same verses in a 1929 travel diary of his Asian expedition. And in 1939, Elizabeth Gaspari, they say a beaming lama at Himis presented her with a set of parchment to Elizabeth Gaspari with the words, "These books say your Jesus was here." And then in 1951 was an admiral. I forgot the name. It's in this book. But it was an admiral in 1951. In 1959, the Chinese take over Tibet. Just so you know. Timelines. There are a lot of places in the world I want to visit. Why are they going to Tibet? Why aren't they going to Palestine? Why are they going to Tibet? Isn't that the wrong direction? Hey, guys, you Christian guys, where are you going? Palestine's over there. It's not over here. Jerusalem's over here, not over there. Where are you going to Tibet for? What's going on in Tibet? See, that's the question. That's the only question. When people say, oh, that's bunk. He never was in Tibet. Really? Because we have 5 eyewitnesses that saw the documents. And 2, at least 2, that, 3 that translated. And 1 translated in Bengali. By the way, try finding that book in Bengali. I can't even find it in Bengali. Where are the writings of that Swami, who actually verbatim copied the manuscript? Swami Abhinanda, 1929. What are we doing here? Let's continue because I think this is fascinating. Okay, Gruber goes much farther. He affirms that although no European or Christian was ever there before, yet their religion agrees with the Romish in all essential points, which we discussed. In the main, the religion of Tibet is the counterpart of the Romish. They believe in one God and a Trinity, in paradise, hell, and purgatory, make suffrages, alms, prayers, and sacrifices for the dead, have a number of convents filled with monks and friars who, beside the 3 vows of poverty, obedience, and charity, make several others. They have confessors who are chosen by their superior and receive their licenses from a lama or from a bishop, without which they cannot hear confessions or impose penance. They use holy water, crosses, and beads. Monsieur Hunk, who traveled in Tibet in 1844 to 46, refers to the affinities between the Lamanistic worship and Catholicism. The cross, the mitra, the dalmatika, the kopi, which the Grand Lamas wear on their journeys, the service with double choir, the samadhi, the exorcism, the censure, the suspended from 5 chains, the benediction, the chaplet, ecclesiastic, celibacy, spiritual retirement, the worship of the saints, the fast, the procession, the litanies, the holy water. All of these are analogies between Buddhists and ourselves meaning Christians. Now, let me stop here. But here's where they go off the track. See, the Tibetan Buddhist monks, Buddhism believes in reincarnation. And Buddhism was formed by Siddhartha, a prince who had all the wealth you can imagine, and who walked away from the wealth to find self-realization. And you can look up the rest. But what they don't talk about, which of course is too much, it's too, as it is, they're already spinning in their heads, oh my God, you think Yeshua was actually in Tibet, got trained, and then went back to his people to teach the word, or however you want to call it, the truth, whatever you want to call it. What they don't talk about is the fact that the Tibetans also understood the power of sound frequency. It's not just Om, Ha, Hum. If you've ever heard the guttural resonance of Tibetan monks chant, it will put you in an altered state of consciousness. I kid you not. If you actually do Om and you close your mouth, the vibration will raise up into your third eye. I kid you not. But most importantly, they understand the power of sound frequency to move monoliths. And this is recorded. They talk about it. What they don't talk about, these Tibetan monks, is how they actually go into the snows in loincloth and meditate, and they do not die of hyperthermia or exposure of any kind. No deadened limbs. Nothing is happening. Their nose isn't blackened. They are nude, damn near, in the snow, meditating for hours. That's power. See, that's what they're not talking about. They're not talking about these high-level monks who are alchemists of their environment, who control their body temperature, their heartbeat, and their breath. That's what they're not talking about. But they are talking about going to Tibet. All these Christian monks going to Tibet in droves. Now it can be said that these analogies are of Christian origin. We think so. We have indeed found neither in the traditions nor in the monuments of the country any positive proof of their adoption. Can you imagine their adoption? Dude, they actually have the original truths. Still, it is perfectly legitimate to put forward conjectures which possess all the characteristics of the most emphatic probability. Reference to Pinkerton's Travel, Volume 7, under a head, A Description of Tibet. By the way, they spell Tibet Thibet, will show that several missionaries have imagined that in the ancient books of the Lamas, some traces remain of the Christian religion, which, as they think, was preached there in the time of the apostles. However, that may be, and without entering on the debate ground of affinities or rites or ceremonies and observances which may have been pagan in their own origin or Romanesque in inception, It may be urged for Mr. Notovich as a reason for admitting the genuineness of his discovery that the two churches might in fact have had one common origin, and that if in the time of the apostles, as contended by the missionaries, the gospel was preached to the Tibetans, nothing is more natural than the companion of Christ, who must have learned from him how and where the wonderful gap in his life was passed, should have desired to visit and did visit the scene of their master's early labors. Did you hear that? They knew. They knew. The Cathars always knew. The Knights Templars always knew where Yeshua had spent, quote unquote, his lost years. They always knew. And be honest, it is 2025, right? 700 years, 800 years. What have we lost in even 200 years? What have we forgotten in just 200 years? And as they always say, history is written by the victors. The limit of the translator's note prevent my entering into such discussion, and I leave the speculation to others. I have translated the life of Isa literally, but have taken more license with the personal part of Mr. Notowich's narrative. Her name was Violet Crisp, Hôtel des Alpes, Lac de Genève, Territat, February 1st, 1895. And I just got to chill. To the publishers, sirs, I am pleased to hear that you've decided on publishing a translation in English of my work, The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ, which appeared in French for the first time in the beginning of last year. This translation is not a literal transcript of the French edition, though unavoidable excisions connect with its publication. My book was first brought out with an amount of haste which has been much to its detriment. I had only 5 days allowed me to draw up the preface, introduction, and resume, and barely a few hours to correct the proofs. This must account for a certain paucity of proof in support of some of my assertions, some gasps in the narrative, and many printers' errors, which my adversaries have loudly proclaimed, which perceive that in their over-righteous zeal to lop off suckers and to draw attention to any blemishes in the bark, they only demonstrate their own powerlessness to attack the trunk itself of the tree I have planted, which defies the hardest blow to lay it low. Indeed, they have rendered me a service for which I now tender my grateful thanks, as they have facilitated a rehandling of the subject which I should myself have deemed indispensable. I am always glad to avail myself of any information, and am not so infatuated with the Oriental knowledge which I possess, not to be aware that I am still a great deal to learn. The English public will therefore be the first to profit by those well-grounded criticism which I have accepted, and the corrections which I should have made spontaneously. I thus offer to the English reader a book purged from all offenses and free from any of the inexactness of detail which I have been made reproach so bitterly, and with somewhat persistence, as in the case of a certain Chinese emperor whose dynasty I erroneously stated and whom I have relegated to his proper chronological rank. What does that mean, all of this? It means he was getting his ass kicked because he was actually so excited. Can you imagine? Can you imagine coming across proof that Isa, which is what they call Jesus in the Quran, Isa was in Tibet? Can you imagine being raised a Catholic or a Protestant and fucking going... by the way, just so you know, backdrop, Nicholas Notovich broke his leg. That's actually why he ended up in the temple. He was just supposed to visit and take photos. That was it. That was it. And he took photos, by the way, of the manuscript. But his, servant was so, stupid that he exposed the plates to the sun because he was trying to lighten the load of the llamas or the yaks, probably yaks they were using, to travel across the road. You have to understand, there's no helicopters. It's 1880 whatever, and they're fucking traveling, and it's fucking a trough. So when he broke his leg, he rested in the Hemis temple. That's actually what happened. And he's resting. He's probably in a cast, being healed by the monks. And of course, here's a European. Of course the monks would talk about Isa in their books. Why wouldn't they? They study from boyhood. I'm going to continue reading. So he had made an error in the Chinese emperor because, let me ask you something. You know what's funny? Ask somebody on the streets of America right now, who is the vice president, and I swear to God, most of them will go blank. I swear to God, because we do it every year. It's a social experiment. Ask people who the president of France is right now. Most people won't know in America, and you should know. I'm not saying you should know all the people who are leading the country, but certainly there's like 5 top countries where you should have a fucking clue. And this is with social media. This is with Google, Wikipedia, WikiLeaks, whatever the fuck you want to look at. There it is. So here they went after him because he got the wrong Chinese emperor and which dynasty in the 1880s. Good luck, my friend. Now do you understand how he fucked up? Yeah, he fucked up because he was like not paying attention or not aware or not privy to it. It has been my aim and desire that the English public, whose intelligence is so keen, but whose susceptibilities are always on the alert against any new thing, especially if it happens to be a religious novelty, should be able to judge of the work on its intrinsic merits and not from the grammatical or typographical errors on which my detractors have relied up to this moment to weaken the full import of my documents. Now, fact checkers during the COVID lockdown. Do you remember? Do you remember what was happening when you put a fact? It was literally a fucking fact, and fact checker would sweep it off your Facebook page or whatever. Do you remember? Do you remember what Hillary Clinton just said? That young people are getting all their news from social media, and we should actually, now the First Amendment is being kicked in the ass because foreign governments want to control us because they don't want us to know the truth. And so here we have exactly that. Oh, he's an idiot. Oh, he's an asshole. Look at the grammar. Oh, he's making mistakes. It can't be true. Look at what he wrote. You've got fact checkers from the 1880s who have an agenda. I am well aware that a skillfully devised criticism has prejudiced the public beforehand against the book, and although generously defended by known and unknown friends, the unknown life of Jesus Christ has been so ranculously attacked by zealots who seem to imagine that I desire to inaugurate a theological controversy, whereas my sole aim was to contribute another stone to the edifice of modern science, that it makes its first appearance in England enveloped in an atmosphere of mistrust. Can you imagine? Do you really think this man wanted that life? Look at what happened to David Icke when he first came out of the chute in the late 1980s. Literally, it's funny how I said 1880s. 100 years later, here comes David Icke. And now people are going, oh shit, he was right. Oh shit. So what is my point to this? Do you think really when people are detractors of a new truth, well, not a new truth, a buried truth is more accurate. Do you really think that when people put their ass on the line, they want to put their ass on the line? You don't think they have better things to do? Most people don't want that kind of attention, trust me. Let me continue his letter. I could treat injurious accusations with contempt. Insults are not reasons, even when advanced in the tone of affected moderation, which characterizes Mr. Macmuller's attempt to demolish me. But I shall nevertheless take up those which relate to my sojourn in Tibet, at Ladakh, and at the Buddhist monastery of Himis. I will firstly briefly resume the objections which have been advanced relative to the means of verifying the authenticity of any document. I underline this. It was objective. Why does the Lama of Himis refuse to answer in the affirmative the questions which have been put to him as to the manuscripts? Because Orientals are in the habit of looking upon Europeans as robbers. who introduced themselves in their midst to despoil them in the name of civilization. Did you hear that? And isn't that true? Hasn't the colonialist system gone to Egypt? Half of the Egyptian, statues and tablets and mummies, are they in Egypt? Most of them are in Britain, France. Where are some of the most important diamonds that were ever discovered on the planet, what you call third world countries? On the crowns of European lands. So wouldn't it be smart for a llama to play stupid? That I succeeded in having these narratives communicated to me was because I made use of the Eastern diplomacy, which I had learned on my travels. I knew how to approach from afar the question which interested me, whilst everybody now asks point blank questions. You know what that means? It means people would go to the Hemis temple today and go, "Hey, I want to see the scrolls that talk about Jesus was here." Yeah, the llamas are going to go, "Oh, hell no," because you're going to probably run away with them. You're probably going to steal them. And are they wrong? No, they're not. The llama says to himself, if these manuscripts are asked for, it is to carry them off. So he naturally holds aloof and refuses any explanation. This prudence is easy to understand when one remarks the procedures of those Europeans who, in contact with the Orientals, only make use of civilization to plunder them and commit the most barefaced robberies. He's not wrong. Not wrong at all. A lady writes to Europe that I have never been seen out there, and that no one has ever heard my name, upon which the pack of janitors of the temple declare I never set foot in Tibet. In other words, that I'm an imposter. A Moravian missionary, the worthy Mr. Shaw, repeats this little joke, which I must call childish, and the seekers after truth add this testimony to the rest and renew the insulting accusation. It is true that since then Mr. Shaw has loyalty withdrawn it. Let me get to the point of this. He went through hell. He was publicly humiliated. But what's interesting is, let me just remind you, the first person to ever go to Tibet, recorded first, not first, but recorded first, was Father Odoric of Ponedero in 1328, went to Tibet for what? I keep asking the question. It is also alleged that the manuscript of the unknown life of Jesus Christ never existed at all in the convent of Hemis, and that I'm simply evolved the whole from my imagination. This is indeed an honor I do not deserve, for my imagination is not so fertile. I'm going to skip into what they saw in Hemis. Let me begin, okay, because there's a personality trait that Isa has. Remember when he throws over the merchants' tables? I'm just going to start here. The white priests and the warriors becoming acquainted with the discourses of Isa, aka Yeshua, addressed to the Sudras, resolved upon his death, and sent with his intent their servants to seek out the young prophet. But Isa, warned of his danger by the Sudras, left the neighborhood of Juggernaut by night, reached the mountain, and established himself in the country of Gautama. Gautama would be Buddha, the birthplace of the great Buddha, Sakyamuni, in the midst of a people worshiping the one and sublime Brahma. So what was happening? Well, again, I'm repeating myself, but I think it's important. Yeshua was in India reading the Vedas, and there's a caste system of 4 castes, right? The Brahmas and the Kshatriyas are the monk class and the warrior class, and below that are the untouchables on that level, merchants, whatever, and I forgot their names, to be honest with you. But Yeshua was there teaching the lower class caste systems about the Vedas. And when the Brahmas found out, they wanted to kill him, period. They were like, you have no right to teach these people anything. This caste system is how it is, and it will not change, and you will not be here to change it. So quite obvious, Yeshua was against supremacy of any kind. He was against racism because the upper class systems were of a lighter skin. I'm just going to say it. Because of the Persian invasions and the intermixing of the people. Like people act like, intermixing bloodlines is rare. It isn't. And the lower class were as dark as night. And so there was a supremacy and a racism that Yeshua came across and was against it. So he was told by some of his devotees, hey, listen, they just found out what you're doing. You're teaching the lower class some truths, and they're out to get you, my friend. You better get the hell out of here. And so he did. He left. He escaped in the cover of night. See, because he had perfected himself in the Pali language, which is one of the dialects of India. And the just Isa applied himself to the study of the sacred writings of the sutras. Volumes and volumes and volumes. So when you talk about the lost years of Yeshua, right? At around 12 years old, he disappears. Whatever age, 9, 10, 12, I don't know, whatever. You choose, whatever the hell. I don't really believe in the Bible. It's been fucking edited so many times. Whatever they say, I'm like, whatever. But what I do know is that he was studying. And when you go back to the Christian story, the Christmas story of the 3 wise men, those are wise men from the East. And they come with, sure, gifts, but instructions to Mother Mary, which are what? Bring him to us when he's ready, when he comes of age. Egypt, India, Tibet. That should be obvious to people, but I don't know why it isn't. They weren't from Norway, okay? These guys weren't from Norway and Sweden and Holland. So, 6 years after Isa, whom the Buddha had elected to spread his holy word, had become a perfect expositor of the sacred writings. Then he left Nepal and the Himalayan mountains, descended into the valley of Rajputana, and went towards the west, preaching to diverse people the supreme perfection of man, which is to do good to one's neighbor, being the sure means of emerging oneself rapidly into the eternal spirit. He who shall have regain his original purity, said Isa, will die having obtained remission for his sins, and he will have the right to contemplate the majesty of God. In crossing pagan territories, the divine Isa taught that the worship of the visible gods was contrary to the law of nature. Do you understand? This is what they found in the Hemis temple. What I'm reading to you is what was found. For man, he said, has not been permitted to see the image of God, and yet he has been made a host of deities in the likeness of the eternal. Moreover, it is incomparable with the human consciousness to make less matter of the grandeur of the divine purity than of animals and objects executed by the hand of man in stone or metal. The eternal lawgiver is one. There's no other God but he. He has not shared the world with any one, neither has he informed anyone of his intentions. Even as a father would act towards his children, so will God judge men after their deaths, according to the laws of his mercy. Never would he so humiliate his child as to transmigrate his soul, as in purgatory, into the body of an animal. Did you hear that? Never would he so humiliate his child as to transmigrate his soul, as in purgatory, into the body of an animal. Why? What is he saying this for? Well, because in India, in Hindustani religions, if you're slovenly, you will incarnate as a pig. If you're lazy, you will be reincarnated as a bear. You can see that in the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, just so you know, just so you understand where that comes from. Why is he saying that? He's saying that if you fuck up in one lifetime, you're not going to be demoted into. And I'm sorry, I love animals, so I have a hard time even saying that. But let's, for this conversation, demoted into the incarnation of an animal. You will not be demoted. You will not be struck down to something lower. And one of the premise, to be honest, of the sutras is that women, well, when you incarnate as a man, you do good. And when you incarnated as a woman, you fucked up. Okay, just so you know. It's pretty much this misogyny has stained pretty much all religions, okay? At least the ones we know of that are still recalled. And Isa, aka Yeshua, did not believe in that. He did not believe. I mean, and think of the logic, okay? And I know we're having a lot of gender wars right now. It seems to be popular to fucking hate the opposite sex, whatever. But what I will say is, for men who really hate women, I mean, fuck, you wouldn't be here without your mother. And some mothers, I'll say, are fucked up. But ultimately, you've got a human being, and there's only one kind of human being that can do that. The feminine carries another human being, and not just a human being, but the soul. She's the container to a second soul in her body. And that's extraordinary. And we do not give enough obeisances to that magic, because that's magical. Okay? But let me continue. So even as a father would act towards his children, so God will judge men after their deaths according to the laws of his mercy. Never would he so humiliate his child as to transmigrate his soul as a purgatory into the body of an animal. The heavenly law, said the Creator by the mouth of Isa, as opposed to the immolation of human sacrifices to an image or to an animal, for I have consecrated to all men the animals and all that the earth contains. Did you understand that? So the concept of sacrifice is something that the Irish did, the Africans did, the Hindustanis did, the Americas, I guess, did, South America. We can definitely know that. That's the truth. And God knows how many other cultures across the planet sacrifice not just animals, but humans. We know this, okay? It's not like... So this was something that was brought here by... Well, I mean, there's... when you read Zachariah Stitchin's books, you realize that it's most likely was brought in from other people, from other planets. All things have been sacrificed to men who is directly and intimately associated with me. His father, therefore, he who shall have stolen from me, my child, will be severely judged and chastised by divine law. Man is not before the eternal judge, as the animal is not before man. The words of Isa spread among the pagans in the midst of the countries he traversed, and the inhabitants forsook their idol. Seeing which the priests exacted of him who glorified the name of the true God, reason in the presence of the people for the reproaches he made against them in a demonstration of the nothingness of their idol. And Isa made answer to them, if your idols and your animals are powerful and really possessed of supernatural strength, then let them strike me to the earth. Work then a miracle, replied the priests, and let thy God confound our gods if they inspire him with contempt. But Isa then said, the miracles of our God have been worked since the first day when the universe was created, and they take place every day at every moment. Whosoever seeth them not is deprived one of the fairest gifts of life. And it is not against pieces of stone, metal, or wood, which are inanimate, that the anger of God will have full recourse, but it will fall on man, who, if they desire their salvation, must destroy all the idols they have made. And it's interesting when you look at the psychology of the statement, idols. Okay, well, the thing is, we as human beings need to hold something. We need to see something. But I think he understood that if we relied on those totems, they would become like Linus blankets. That we would need churches. We would need high temples. We would need to build these constructions, which, by the way, the Cathars never did. They didn't believe in these ostentatious buildings and these ideas that to seek God you had to go to church. Many, in fact, would actually do their sermons or talks. I'm not going to call them sermons, talks, philosophical talks on the existence of realities and the existence of God presence. We're done in barns, in nature, out in the fields. Never did they build temples, churches. That was why one of the reasons why their belief system of equality and non-supremacy became so powerful. All of France, a lot of people started converting to that process of philosophy called Catharism and moved into Italy. And I think once it hit Italy, the Pope of Rome got wind of it and went, oh, we got to get rid of these people. Like they can't, yeah, I love my fucking gold cups and my plates, and I love my brocades weaved in gold. And yeah, I can't do that. They can't live. And so they were slaughtered. There is documentation of the Cathars being tortured and questioned, okay, just like they did with Joan of Arc. And it's it's all we have. The way they answer the questions is why we know of their philosophy, to be quite frank, because everything they wrote was destroyed, and I think some were stolen by other monks who were questioning this relatively new religion, honestly, right? Which was the Catholic Church. So when we look at the lost years, of Yeshua, and we refuse to look at the evidence, I mean, seriously, evidence that he was in Tibet and that it's recorded that he traveled through India. Why? Why is that so hard to believe? I still don't understand why that's hard to believe. And when you read this book, by the way, it's not on Audible, which I find interesting. Elizabeth Clare Prophet has every book she's ever written in Audible except for 2 books. I thought that quite interesting. One is Mary of Magdalene, okay? And the second is The Lost Years of Jesus. I find that quite interesting. It's not on Audible. Everything's by design. I'm going to read about Kaspari. There she is. Elizabeth Kaspari. Okay, let's read about what she saw when she went to Hemis, okay? And hopefully we'll come across the Admiral. Any questions or comments, by the way? I love reading this stuff, and I'm glad that some of you are staying with me on this. The parchment in hand. Many of the world's great scientists and historical breakthroughs have been made by people searching for something entirely different. Columbus was looking for the Andes when he found the Bahamas. Röntgen was experimenting with the cathode rays when he discovered the X-ray. And Fleming was studying bacteria when he stumbled upon penicillin. One seldom knows what lies around the bend or in the next pass. The necessary ingredients seem to be only the inquiring mind, perseverance, the daring to follow one's hunches, and the intuitive faculty of the heart, and ultimately to rely on the promise, seek and you shall find, which is in no way guarantees what one shall find, but only that something will be forthcoming as a result from noble effort, and if one is faithful to the end. Take the case of Elizabeth Gittaz. Her plan did not include taking the high road to Ladakh and rediscovering the manuscript purportedly found by Nicholas Natovich, Swami Abhananda, and possibly Nicholas Roerich. For one thing, a bone disease in her left foot left her unable to walk during much of her childhood. Her immediate goals lay more in getting up out of bed than in traveling up and down steep mountain passes to a remote Buddhist monastery in the Himalayas. But then, pre-signs of our fate might prove overwhelming. One step at a time, our lives unfold. And for Elizabeth, the first step was just that, taking a step. Things did not look promising. A string of surgeries tried unsuccessfully to operate on her foot, and her minister concluded that it was not the will of God for her to regain her health and run and play like other children. But against all odds, she would not give up. Her family finally located a physician who thought he could help her. His treatment was novel. Under the circumstances, it was the only thing that even offered a glimmer of hope in more than one way. He prescribed sun treatments, and they worked. Within 4 years, she could walk. Did you hear that? Sun treatment. Now, what are they doing to the sun? There was a documentary called Eat the Sun. Eat the Sun. You may want to look it up. The power of the sun is, well, I mean, we can't survive without it. And yet, things are being done in the elements to, well, many people report that the sun's color has changed. And why is that? Also, the sun, if you look into it, there's a way to look into it without looking into it. I don't know how to explain it. That activates the pineal gland. But let's continue. He prescribed sun treatments and they worked. Within 4 years, she could walk. On the road to recovery, Elizabeth began to study the piano. It was an instrument she could play with her foot propped up. She fell in love with it and became an excellent pianist. Her service as a piano tutor began to be in the great demand around her native village of Château d'Aux, Switzerland. Not unexpectedly, Mademoiselle Guettaz decided that her vocation was to teach music to children. She studied hard and received a diplôme de perfectionnement from the Institut de Ribaud-Pierre at Montreux, Switzerland. Then she went on to the École Normale de Musique de Lausanne and there received 2 advanced degrees in music pedagogy. Upon graduation, she found a music school in Château d'Aux and developed a unique teaching method which took the drudgery out of practice and made her school an immediate success. From all over Europe, both beginning piano students and aspiring music teachers flocked to her Alpine school. In 1929, Monsieur Charles Caspari came to Château d'Aux to be restored by the French mountain air and sunshine. Not only did he regain his health, but he met and courted Mademoiselle Guettaz, and after their marriage, he took over many of the administrative details of the school, leaving Madame more time for the calling she loved, music. They worked together at Château d'Aux for 8 years. But the finger of destiny was not content to leave Madame Caspari in the Alps. In the spring of 1937, a chance remark set in motion a chain of events that was to lead her all over India and finally to the rooftops of Himas Monastery in the Himalayas. "There's a great teacher coming to France to give lectures on science and religion," a friend said to her one day. "You really ought to go." "Why not?" the Caspari thought. So they crossed Lake Geneva to Evian, where the lecture was being held. It was sponsored by the Swiss members of Mazdanaz, the Western Zoroastrian movement. Madame Caspari was taken with the teachings and joined the organization soon after. At the lecture, she met the leaders of Mazdanaz. When they discovered she was soon going to London, they made a seemingly unimportant request. "Would you be so kind, Madame, to convey our greetings to our beloved Mother Superior?" Happily, she agreed. The rendezvous was more than she expected. Riding in a cab through the streets of London to the address given, she imagined that the head of the movement would be a prim English matron. Much to her surprise, the driver pulled up to a building as impressive as Buckingham Palace. Madame Caspari was ushered into a Louis XIV salon, where she found herself standing before an imposing lady who turned out to be an American called Mother Gloria by Mazdanaz followers, the regal Mrs. Clarence Gask. In ensuing conversation, Madame Caspari learned that Mrs. Gask was also head of the World Fellowship of Faith, formed for the unity and cooperation of those engaged in the spiritual research. Mrs. Gask, delighted to discover that Madame Caspari was a musician, and explained that she was planning a lecture tour of the cities of northern England. In her direct and charming manner, she said, "I need a pianist. You must come with me." "But I have a husband and a school of music," Madame Caspari replied. I can't just fly away like this. I have to go home." Mrs. Gask handed her the telephone. "Talk to Monsieur." Charles told her to follow her heart, and so she accepted the invitation. Thus began a long friendship between Madame Caspari and Mrs. Gask. At the end of the lecture tour, Madame Caspari returned to her home school, but not for long. One Monday morning in December 1937, she received a letter from Mrs. Gask saying she was planning a trip to Tibet with stops in Ceylon, India, and Kashmir. In the course of her journey, she proposed the study of Buddhism and a pilgrimage to Mount Kailas, a sacred Tibetan mountain. She closed with, "You and Monsieur are coming with me." The offer was too tempting. The Casparis, also interested in the religion of the East, knew by this time that a request from their dear friend was not to be denied. They had only 3 short weeks to tie up their affairs, pack, and set sail in the steamer Orontes for Ceylon. In every country, Mrs. Gask and her party of 9 were received with utmost respect and even ceremony by religious leaders. One morning, their train arrived in Madras at 6 a.m. Madame Caspari woke up and peeked out the window. The Maharaj of Pithapuram, head of India's World Fellowship of Faith, was in attendance with his retinue, complete with red carpet. He insisted that Mother Gloria and Madame Kaspari stay at his palace of the Roses. Here, the travelers sojourned in an elegant guest house surrounded by the fabled splendor of the East. The same sort of elaborate hospitality became part for the course throughout much of their journeys. After passing through Madras, Mumbai, and New Delhi, they headed north to Kashmir. In the spring of 1938, Mrs. Gas rented a bungalow in Srinagar, the capital of Kashmir, where they could prepare their gear for the Tibetan path. They spent the better part of a year there. Everything had to be thought of: food, equipment, and servants, not to mention medicine, batteries, and creams to protect them from the elements. The Himalayas were not to be tackled lightly. They started out in the spring of 1939. First, they traveled by bus as far as they could go. Beyond that point, no wheels but prayer wheels could venture into the fortress of the Himalayas. They added to their caravan 12 servants, 1 translator, and 112 ponies, plus guides and pony wala, or drivers. Their aim was extensive but not unheard of. They planned to stop at several monasteries on the way to Mount Kailas to observe the practices of Buddhism, the custom and daily life of the people, for whom his teaching was the moving force. They also had high hopes of getting to Himas in time for the famed devil dance, renowned for its beautiful costumes of rich brocade. Little did they know that they would return enriched beyond all expectation with an experience very different from the traditional pilgrim's path. After spending their first night under the stars, they awoke at dawn and were early in the saddle, riding hard to make camp. Due to the skills of their servant, the very best to be found in Kashmir, and foresight in packing, the journey was less arduous than it had been for Nicholas Notovich nearly 52 years before. While they got acquainted with their mounts, the servants galloped ahead to prepare the first camp at the meadow of Sonamarg. In what became their daily routine, they set up tents and began cooking hot meals for the hungry travelers. Wizards at mountain cookery, in no time they all built makeshift ovens and baked fresh bread. And so the pilgrims settled into this comfortable ritual. Traveling ever upward towards the first high pass, the Soji La, soaring up to 11,580 feet, they found, hang on, there's all these pictures. Upon arrival, the snow covered the ground, although it was July. Their guide made them travel single file in complete silence. "Do not speak," they said, "you will bring down an avalanche." As they descended, the snow ended up suddenly as it had begun, and they were assailed by the sweet smell of wild roses hedges. Did you hear this? Did you understand? They're in snow. They're told to be in silence because if you speak, you could actually launch, catapult an avalanche. And suddenly, out of nowhere, it's almost like they crossed a portal. I'm not joking when I say that. They crossed the portal and suddenly they are assailed by the sweet smell of white roses hedges, down treacherous defiles along the edges of gorges, across scorching deserts, which became freezing at sundown as the wind swept off the glaciers, braving chasms spanned by bridges impossibly narrow. The travelers pushed on. Despite the large caravan, it was not uncomfortable for wild beasts to prowl close to the tents of Mrs. Gask and the Kasparis. On some welcome nights, the two ladies stayed in dak bungalows built for official use. Traveling towards Leh, they encountered inhabitants of the seemingly inhospitable land. The friendly, open, and ingenious Ladakites were always ready with a big smile, cry of "Jole, Jole, hello, hello," and a big welcome for Mrs. Gast. Greeted by the head lama or chief villager at every stop point, that they were served with great ceremony, Tibetan tea. The soup-like beverage was flavored with rancid yak butter. The more important the guest, the more rancid the butter. Hence, the more rancid lump was always saved for Mrs. Gast. Slowly, traversing the ancient caravan route, they visited Molbek, Lamayuru, and other monasteries. Most striking was the constant contrast characterized by the countryside. Freezing winds that changed to gentle breezes in a few hundred feet. Smiling lamas living in enchanted palaces. Juxtaposition against wasteland. Seemingly endless high plateaus, barren in every direction, interrupted by rich green oases surrounded by groves of trees. Moving amidst the all-pervading spirit of the Buddha, they talked to monks and toured monasteries. The faces of the lamas, many of them young, expressed a childlike curiosity and a joviality. It seemed to the pilgrims that while traditions had survived, much of the real wisdom was buried away in aging manuscripts. The parchments and tankas, tapestries depicting the lives of saints and Buddhas, sculptures and statues they saw along the way were carefully preserved, though in some monasteries the once vibrant frescoes were fading with the years. Although the people revered Guantanamo Buddha, it seemed as if their religion now, but a ritual, was transmitted to them more through majestic mountains, even in their collective unconscious memory, than through ancient texts. But the traditions were scrupulously followed. Prayer flags flapped from nearly every available point. Prayer wheels, cylinders, either containing or inscribed with prayers, could be found embedded in walls, especially in monasteries, in the hands of pilgrims, or fitted with paddles and set in streams to keep a never-ending vigil. They believed that the spin of a wheel or the flutter of a flag was equivalent to uttering the inscribed prayer. Perhaps it was their solution to the injunction, pray without ceasing. These myriad impressions, like many hands sketching scenes on mural, combined to make up Madame Kaspari's story of Ladakh. As the first, and what was destined to be the only leg of their Tibetan journey, was drawing to its close, the caravan reached Nimu, a village just before Leh. Here they paused to wash their clothes and ponies in the river. Camping in the warm sun beside the Hindus, they had a chance to contemplate the ice-covered peaks, glaciers shining in the sun, gentle river at their feet. The next day they reached Leh, which at 11,500 feet is one of the highest cities in the world. At the entrance of the city, they encountered a chotan, a silent sentinel, a quarter-mile wall studded with stones carved with a token of centuries' devotion. Om Mani Padmu Hum bade them welcome. The narrow streets were characterized of a town that had never known a car. Its crowded bazaars were a meeting place for Chinese, Indians, Kashmiris, Arabs, and Tibetans. The king's palace, where Roderick had stayed, presided over all. They visited the ancient monastery and soon pressed on for Hemis and the pageant. Leaving the city, they stared out across the great desert plateau, separating Leh and Hemis. All a long, hot day, they traversed this desert of the pink stones, as their fellow traveler Cyrano called. As dusk fell and night, they still had not reached Hemis, and suddenly they were in a cool, fragrant oasis, right at the foot of a steep gorge. High above, the invisible monastery clung to the face of a rock. I'm going to stop here. I remember reading Rempati Lopsang. And Rempati Lopsang was a walk-in. Okay, straight up walk-in. And he talks about walking in the Himalayas and suddenly them crossing a portal where suddenly there's like, I'm gonna call him Lang Lang, okay? I'm not saying that's what it was, but like orchid-like flowers and the perfume and fruit trees. And it's in the middle of the Himalayas. I'll never forget that. I was like, holy shit. And here we are, we're reading how they're crossing. It's weird too, because the way that she's writing it, it's almost, do they know they're crossing portals? Because how can you be in a snow-peaked and suddenly there are roses and suddenly there's an oasis? What? Those are high vibrational portals they're going through. At least that's how I'm seeing it. They received their usual reception the next morning when their welcoming party arrived. The abbot himself and 2 chief assistants came down to provide Mrs. Gask escort up to Hemis. The monks had prepared a beautiful guest house for Mrs. Gask and Madame Kaspari. The rest of the group camped in tents near a little stream, but alas, the pilgrims found that because of the difficulties and delays of their journey, they had just missed the sacred festival. As luck would have it, before they had a chance to be disappointed, the abbot told them that the paraphernalia hadn't been packed away and offered to give Mrs. Gass a command performance of the entire 3-day pageant. The next day it began with a panoply of brilliant costumes and animated Lama actors. A dramatic portrait of Armageddon unfolded before them. The power of good was personified as Buddha in the form of a lion, symbolized the strength and courage needed to drive the evil one out of the world. He was beset by demons, skeletons, and animals in grotesque masks, played with great glee by the junior lamas. All whirled and gyrated to the braying of the Eastern orchestra, 10-foot trumpets, cymbals, and drums of every size, increasing in volume to the final climax, the casting out of the evil spirits and the triumph of the Buddha. After the festival, they lingered in the Lamazary for 4 days, touring the temple and the library, chatting with the monks and enjoying the view from Hemis' high rooftop. I'm going to read a footnote on the bottom. When asked about the difference between her account of Hemis and that of Roerich, Madame Kaspari recalls the Hemis library as clean, well-kept, and small, while Roerich says the manuscripts were stored in dusty corners. Madame Kaspari answered that Hemis was probably cleaned up quite a bit at festival time when she was there. Furthermore, there was a 14-year difference between their visits. Another explanation for this discrepancy may be found in an account of Marco Pallas, a Greek who visited Hemis in 1936. He noted that Hemis had 2 libraries, a small one with a well-cared-for collection of manuscripts, and a larger, less organized room where piles of books were stored in disarray. It's also possible that a new, more careful librarian had taken over since Roderick's visit. Okay, perfect. So, why they're putting this footnote is because a lot of the naysayers are trying to find holes in these stories. That Yeshua lived in India, studied in Tibet. Let's continue. On the 3rd day, Mrs. Gask and Madame Kaspari were sitting on the roof watching a traveling tanka painter. Nearby, the monk's letters, writing cross-legged before a small table, was painting beautiful Tibetan script with delicate brushes. In the midst of this scene, the librarians and 2 other monks approached the ladies carrying 3 objects. Madame Kaspari recognized them as Buddhist books made of sheets of paper sandwiched between 2 pieces of wood and wrapped in brocade, green and red and blue, seeded with gold. With great reverence, the librarian unwrapped one of the books and presented the parchments to Mrs. Gask. These books say, "Your Jesus was here." One sentence. Madame Kaspari looked at them in awe. In a few suspended seconds, the last verse of the book of John swept through her mind like an endless river as a child in Sunday school in Chateau d'Aix. She listened in wonderment. And there are also many other things which Jesus did, to which, if they should be written every one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that should be written. Did the apostle of Christ's love know that his Jesus had been there? Did the Master recount his faithful journey to his beloved disciples with whom he had shared the mysteries of the kingdom? If so, had someone deliberately suppressed his historical information, which could be so meaningful, so precious to Christians? Wouldn't Jesus want us to know how he spent the most important 17 years of his life in the preparation for his universal and triumphant message? Your Jesus was here. It was incomprehensible that such an earth-shaking event should have been kept secret from all the Christendom for all these centuries. Why didn't the whole world know about Jesus' journey to Ladakh? She and Mother Gloria looked at one another, exulting in their joy and amazement. Together, they examined the manuscript more closely, covered as they were with elegant Tibetan scripts. Searching her memory, Madame Kaspari recalled hearing a legend that Jesus had been in India and Alexandria, but never in her wildest imaginings had it occurred to her that her Jesus had come so far, so high, here, to the Himalayas. In that moment, she was completely unaware of the 55-year-old Nicholas Notowich controversy, nor could she guess the importance of her eyewitness account to the ongoing debate. Do you understand? This is not Wi-Fi world. Why would she know about Nicholas Notowich? Why would she know about the controversy? Of course she wouldn't know. It's 1939. She observed that the librarian was speaking out of conviction born of monasteries' ancient traditions. His words rang with the authority of an exact knowledge handed down with the manuscripts from head lama to head lama. It was not hearsay, no mere oral tradition, because the writings were in hand and for a moment in her hand. The evidence was there, kept intact by the unbroken continuity of religious order. Here was the parchment. There was the script. Here was the treasured record that Jesus had come on a mission to India. And here were Buddhist monks who revered her Jesus as one of the great spiritual teachers of all time. I find it interesting that only 3 people find it is this interesting. Only 3 people find it interesting. Why is this important to understand? Because if we're going to deconstruct misogynistic religions, we have to understand how it first began. What was oppressed, what was hidden, what was denied, what was lost. You have to know your enemy very well. And there's an old saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. There's no question that Yeshua lived. But we have had preachers, evangelistic motherfuckers who have made people lose their shirt, their mortgage to send money at 3 o'clock in the morning. We have had people take their own lives because they were told that they were born in sin. We have had young people who self-realized, I'm gay, who were literally thrown in the hellish world of their own making, created by supposed a priest, preacher, whatever. We have had women blamed for eating from the fruit of knowledge. We have had women blamed. We've had women blamed for eating from the fruit of knowledge. We have had women blamed. The egoic realize what went down. And even if it's a parable, by the way, even if it's not even true, right? Because, I mean, come on, let's face it. Just a man and a woman created the whole human race. Come on. When you read Lilith, when you understand Lilith was the actual wife created in equality, and then she goes out and realizes, wait, hang on, there's all these humans? Are you kidding me? I thought we were the only ones. But Eve doesn't know that, but Lilith does. And then, of course, they literally demonize Lilith. She becomes a witch. She becomes a succubus. That's why I read these books. I don't read these books to fucking evangelize to you anything. I read these books to myself and to you to deconstruct what the fuck happened and why it happened and who controlled it from day one. And I find it interesting, again, always it's weird. People want to know, but they don't want to do the work to really know. And the work takes reading, you become a scholar to yourself. Because then when you have your visions during meditation, when you have your incredible knowing, right? Your downloads, your guidance, you start believing it. You know why it becomes effortless? Because you know the fucking fuckery that happened before and how power was suppressed. When you know what was done, when you have your downloads, you start not gaslighting yourself anymore. My Jesus was here in him, as Madame Kaspari thought. Maybe he even sat on one of those very rooftops here or at La, or studied in one of the ancient libraries. She pondered the implication of the find. Her mind reeled at the thought of Jesus traveling and perhaps all over the world. She realized that up until that hour, Jesus had been to her, as to most Christians, a product of Palestine. He was born there. He lived there, died there. Any religious training he received was part of the Jewish tradition. To place Jesus in Tibet or India would mean that he had studied their customs, their languages, their religions. That's why he didn't get along with the Pharisees. Because there was supremacy there. He didn't believe I am the chosen. He believed in equality. He believed in equality. That's what I find interesting. I'm going to read it to you again, because this is huge. Because this takes Judeo-Christian and it literally fucking drop kicks it into fucking the territory of lies, more lies. Listen to what she said. She realized that up until that hour, Jesus had been to her, as to most Christian, a product of Palestine. He was born there, he lived there, and died there. Any religious training he received was part of the Jewish tradition. To place Jesus in Tibet or in India would mean that he had studied their customs, their languages, their religion. That's a fucking mic drop. Because at this point now, women are equal. Reincarnation is part of life. And the question now is, right, what is the question? How to control wrong desires and how to bring in right desires. What is wrong desires? I want a jet plane. I want a jet plane. I want to be a billionaire. What is right desires? I want abundance for myself and my family. I want to connect to higher forces. I want to not be a match to 3D. I want to be a match to 5D. Does that make sense? Why did Jesus feel compelled to undertake this journey, just as she had prior to his Palestinian mission? And to what manifold purpose did our Father send him? Indeed, this casual encounter atop the world had far-reaching theological implications. Maybe the teachings of Jesus told to John substantiate in turn the teachings of Gautama, or the Vedas. So the apostles could have never really understood what he was saying. There were things that he probably told Mary Magdalene because she was a high priestess of Isis. So she would have understood that. And there are theories that she studied in the temples of Egypt. So they would have matched energy. They would have been equals, and they would have taught each other things. What she learned, what he learned. And to destroy that power couple was absolutely, absolutely important. Because the fracture of the, of the masculine and the feminine, when you fracture these, just think for a minute, what power couple, what does that entail? The balance of the yin and yang. And why is it good to fracture these power couples? Well, because you can control them, remotely control people when they don't trust the opposite gender, when there's misandry and misogyny. You're good to, it's like you don't have to do anything else. They'll do the rest on their own. And he who also ponders these questions may wonder too, why Mother Gloria and Elizabeth Kaspari were selected by the monks. Many Europeans had visited him, as some skeptical, others sincere, but only a handful, as far as our own research had been able to discover, were told of the document. Why were Mrs. Gask and Madame Kaspari put in a singular position of adding their voices to the few unknown confirmation of the existence of the Issa documents at Hemis? Perhaps the monks saw that these pilgrims were different, and that they were people devoted to the study of their religion, reverent and accepting of their heritage of spiritual knowledge, who did not view Buddha as a heathen idol or a piece of Oriental art. I'm going to tell you actually why. I know that there were a lot more people that went to Hemes, and a lot of them walked away saying, I'm not saying shit. And why wouldn't they say shit? To protect the monks, to protect them. That's why. Because when you're really from a place of heart, you're going to come across some information and you're going to say, yeah, I'm not saying anything. This needs to be protected. Like, I'm not going to put these people in peril. And don't forget, some of you have just joined me. The first recorded father was in 13, I forgot the actual, but 13, I'm going to make it up, 1378 or 1328. Went to Tibet. And it was very important to read the arduous journey to Hemis. It was very important to read all that and not skip that. Buddha as a heathen or idol or a piece of art. Evidently, they knew that these two devotees posed no threat and would not try to confiscate. Did you hear this? Confiscate the documents or walk off with souvenirs from their libraries. For whatever reason, on that momentous occasion in the summer of 1939, Mrs. Gask and Madame Kaspari joined a small group of pilgrims who had been chosen by Providence to testify regarding some of the best kept secrets of the life of Jesus Christ. Each member of the select group journeyed to Hemis in a different state of mind, with varying levels of expectation, and each uncovered the same story. Nicholas Nadovich, who had heard rumors of it and went in search of the documents. Swami Abhayananda, who went to see for himself and to verify Nadovich's story. Nicholas Raurik, who had heard Isa legends recounted all over Ladakh and expected to find corroboration in some form. And finally, Mrs. Clarence Gask and Madame Elizabeth Kaspari, who were served the ancient books on a silver platter without having so much as lifted a finger of the mind, and most certainly unaware of the legend of the finds of Nadovich, Abhananda, and Raurik. Madame Kaspari descended the slope to the plain with the rest of the party. Camping in the oasis that night, she and Charles listened to his shortwave radio. World War II had been declared. They had to get back to Switzerland as soon as possible. They decided not to go on to Mount Kailas as planned. And though they made haste down the trail, they arrived in Srinagar too late to get a seat on the last civilian transport. They were stuck in India for 9 long years, wondering what was happening to their home, their world. Madame Kaspari tucked her precious treasure away in her memory, only volunteering it many years later at a Summit University Forum interview after having heard of the beautiful verses about Jesus reportedly copied by Nicholas Nadovich from ancient Tibetan manuscripts at the monastery of Hemis. I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there because, honestly, The Lost Years of Jesus by Elizabeth Clare Prophet is the book. I highly recommend you buy it. You can actually buy it on eBay for like fucking $10, free shipping. And why am I bringing this up again and again? Well, we have monks walking for peace, and as they well know, as we all know, all of us who are in the spiritual community who have a compass that we trust, when monks start, when Buddhist monks come out of their meditations to walk for peace, and our country doesn't know how to act and doesn't know that Yeshua was of that same mind and that Yeshua is walking with them, that these monks are fractals of his energy, of Mary of Magdalene, and that we have to have more respect and understand silence with silence. I don't know why people are so uncomfortable with shared silence. Silence opens the portals of telepathy. If you're talking, how in the hell are you going to actually connect to telepathy? Downloads, a reset of the nervous system. The world right now is run by Neanderthal fools, greedy, who want more and more and more. The average human being who has a heart, who has empathy, wants the freedom of their mind, body, and spirit left intact. They want to live in peace, to raise their animals, their children, to read their books, to do whatever the hell they want, to build home, whatever. Bake bread, make love, create the apothecaries, and they want to be left the fuck alone. But you have a handful of assholes who want to just take and take and take. And the thing about these wrong desires, see, we're talking about wrong desires. You are seeing in real time wrong desires. And wrong desires are never fulfilled. It is a dark, black abyss that is never fed. And yesterday I did a live on the Ascension Declaration and breaking 3D soul contracts with everything to move into a new earth. Portals exist, ley lines exist, power exists. Freddie Silver did a book called Portals. You can actually look it up. He also wrote a book called Divine Blueprint about sacred sites. Sound frequency, crop circles, healing energy. Many of the evil that you now see in real time was always there. It was undercover, it was cloaked, and now it's in full view. I'm saying the same thing in 60 different ways. But to just tell you that we're good. We're going to be just fine. And you have to wrestle with your monkey mind until you become the sovereign being that you were born to be all these incarnations. So go on my YouTube channel. You'll see a deer. You'll see a stag with all these people in silhouettes with the sun rising. You might want to listen to that. There's also a starseed, black velvet starseed. You'll see plants behind her. It's about ascension and what's next. Kind of look at these two videos. I highly recommend them. They're free. I have over 900 videos, 930 videos on ascension, twin flames, things of that nature, to help you figure yourself out, you know? But when monks walk for peace, and I'm glad to see so many people understand and recognize the severity of our situation, it's not to put you in a place of fear. It's for you to know that you're going to be just fine. But you need to make sure that you're not in a place of absolute despair and fear, because it quite honestly can drag you down very fast. Okay? So if you're lucky to be on the path of these monks, do better, do well. Be also gently redirecting people, not to act like it's a fucking, it's not Las Vegas, okay? We're not at the casino, loud and crazy and throwing around fucking hot dog sandwiches to people. It's insane, some of the shit I'm saying. It's insane. It's loud. It's insane. And it shows the hive mind of low vibrational people who don't have a clue and yet feel superior because they're Christians, which is a joke, actually. So, you know, try to do your own post, your own recommendations, like create your own best practice. And let's try to show these men, these beautiful Buddhist monks, that we honor them, we give obeisances. Do you know how you give obeisances to someone like that? You actually don't kneel, you go flat on the floor with your forehead to the floor. Your whole body's on the floor. That's how you give obeisances. And it's not that they want it. In fact, they might, you know, but it shows absolute surrender and respect. And I would suggest you do the same for Pachamama, Bhumi, Gaia, Mother Earth. Give obeisances to Mother Earth. And I have the 4 corners above and below, which is on my YouTube channel under Guided Meditations. And I would honestly suggest that you look at that and listen to it and then make it part of your spiritual practice. Because as you grow and as you walk out of the cave of ignorance, you will have moments where you feel like you're being attacked. Please don't run back into the cave of ignorance. This is actually, it actually shows that you're actually doing quite well, believe it or not. What happens is you start getting spiritually attacked. It's going to fucking scare the shit out of you. And I will say to you that it means that you're becoming dangerous now because you're waking up. Okay? And many people go back to being born again and all that bullshit, and they go back to their cave of ignorance. Don't be that person. Namaste. Much love on your journey.